intercepted. The third Buffalo takeaway today. An end zone throw. That's going to be a Buffalo touchdown to Gabriel Davis. But he's got some blocks. John Brown zooming inside the 5. First and goal, Buffalo. Plenty of time for Josh Allen. Wide open. End zone. Touchdown, Buffalo Bills.
This is the Buffalo Nerd with Colt Schroeder.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of the Buffalo Nerd. As you can see, you're fortunate enough to not have a solo, just me by myself again. We get joined by another special guest this week for episode 3. I'm joined by Mr. Dana Lane. He's over there, actually. And so what's pretty cool about how this worked out is when I reached out to Dana to ask him to come onto the show, because the show is all about charities and stuff. His actual charity that he chose for this being episode 3 actually is 3 Square organization, which is pretty cool that it mapped out that way. But so you can see, I'm obviously joined today by Dana Lane. Mr. Lane, sir, why don't you go ahead and let the folks know who you are, kind of what you do, and we'll get started.
Sure. Well, Colt, I appreciate you having me on. Obviously, I love to talk sports, but it's really unique that you give people the opportunity to talk about different charities, and I think there's a ton here in Vegas that really have stepped up, and we'll talk about one of those later. But for me personally, I'm a Las Vegas-based handicapper. I've been in this town for 28 years, 24 of them as a professional handicapper. I'm also the play-by-play broadcaster for UNLV hockey. I contribute to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, write for various websites, work for pickdogs.com. Basically I wake up every single day and it's always something different. But the bottom line is I spend a lot of time analyzing sports and really trusting my gut about a lot of things, because the longer you've been in this industry, the more you're able to, kind of trust yourself. And I think that's the one thing where people really go wrong when they try to, go to the window for the first time to bet on sporting events is, they're listening to their head and their heart, but not their gut. And the gut is what is going to really get you into the win column a lot more than the loss column.
Right. Yeah, that's funny. You sound like you might be a little busy then. Right, like with all these things that you're doing, as we started chatting a little bit more, and you're telling me more about yourself. You were a veteran as well, right? And yes. You served, and you're a New Yorker originally. Is that correct?
I was thinking about that today. So you're in Buffalo, and we used to. I'm from Central New York, around the Albany area, and right. But we went out to Buffalo. I mean, I can't tell you, out to Darien Center for concerts and. Back in the day where I used to be considered an athlete, we'd go out there for state baseball tournaments. And, so I have a little bit of history out your way, but
yeah, that's awesome.
Certainly the state of New York has been far behind me for many years.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm in Sacramento currently, but yeah, I grew up, I grew up right outside of Darien, actually, in the small town of Fillmore in Allegheny County. So yeah, Darien was, the hot spot. So I've been there. So that's funny. So it's very cool. And like you mentioned, the reason, this is the Buffalo Nerd, because I am a bit into numbers myself, right? I was actually, as we were getting ready to chat, you were telling me you just finished your grind for the day, basically, of what you're going to try to accomplish today, right? As I was thinking to myself, who am I giving my money today to, right? As when I go ahead and mess this up and try to look at numbers myself. So I wanted to really bring on somebody that's really good at it. You write, for the review, if you go and you look at, you can see the ticker, for those of you going to be watching this and, seeing this on YouTube, the website where you can kind of, get on board with what Dana does, kind of see his record about how good he really is at this. I mean, this is no small task to win at this game of gambling, right? I mean, it's very difficult. But so that's kind of a little bit about Dana, which brought him here to me today. And, as the other part of the show is really all about, we want to chat charities and find out cool things that's going on. And, it's not cool things necessarily in Buffalo all the time, but everywhere, and, the Bills Mafia, I know we're present in Vegas. There's a Vegas Bills Mafia backers group there in Vegas. So there's present. I have a good buddy of mine that lives in Vegas that, I know he's still a Bills fan, right? So it's there. So let's touch a little bit on 3 Square, right? So you reached out and, I said, Dana, who do you want to chat about? Who's the charity that Dana wants to back and he wants everybody to know about? And you sent over 3 Square. So I looked up 3 Square, and 3 Square is doing incredible things. I mean, it's huge what they're actually doing. The video you sent me today, which you guys will be able to find in the show notes, there's going to be a link to that. They're doing incredible stuff. But Dana, just why don't you kind of break down a little more? I mean, you're right next to what they're actually doing. Why you wanted to chat about them and what they're up to.
Well, interesting enough about this organization, I've always known about them, but with my wife being a teacher, of course, they were instrumental. I mean, almost instantaneously after, last March when COVID really hit. And, there was a lot of families in this town. We went from 4% unemployment to almost 33% unemployment. And when the casino shut down, it was through the roof. So a lot of people were wondering, where's my next meal coming from? And, they stepped right up. In fact, they were at my wife's school basically the next day or 2 days later. Now, thankfully we were fine, but there was a little bit of a panic because we were thinking, well, where's milk coming from? Because if you went to the store, there was no eggs, I remember the day she brought home eggs because somebody gave eggs to her. And I'm like, wow, we were very thankful, even though, it probably could have, gone somewhere else, but everybody eventually got everything. But it was great that they were stepping up for everybody. I mean, they weren't asking, where did you come from? And, how much are you making? It was like everybody who came there, and she was there to volunteer, which is why, she was able to get the eggs. But, they stepped up for all the families here. And the one thing, no matter what we ever had to go through as a city, nobody had to wonder where their next meal was coming from. All they had to do was reach out to Three Squares. And they were, I think the day after, you'll see in the video, the day after, COVID really hit and really took effect, they had 7,000 calls to their call center with families that were, worried about where their next meal was coming from. And the flip side of that, and why I love this city more than anything, and I know a lot of people think, well, it's a gambling town and this happens and that happens, but at the heart of it, when you live here and the people that actually, work in this town, I've never been in a town where people gave more than they did in this town. In fact, there was almost 15,300 people that gave, new people that donated to Three Squares after COVID hit. And that was in addition to the 53,000 that donate on a regular basis. So this town stepped up again, as they do for Thanksgiving and at Christmas. And, it was no surprise that they did it in this time of need. But what a tremendous organization that they are. And they've been doing this for years. So it was no surprise that they were the first ones to actually step up.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you keep mentioning they've been doing it for a few years. It's not somebody that just came into the game here recently during COVID, right? As I was going back, they've been doing this for a while now. And, when you should watch this video, you're going to see the link to this video, because it's the folks that are running the show are very inspiring. They just, as you listen to them, you can hear them, them choking up in the voice, that it matters to them. It truly does matter what they're doing. And, some of the numbers, like you mentioned, the unemployment rate was skyrocketing. I think a lot of people, like you said, think of Vegas, they think of gambling and everything, but they don't realize how many jobs the casino provides for the local people, right? Like when you shut down a casino, you're talking about everybody from cleaning the rooms clear down to, running the book and doing everything. I mean, that's tons and tons of jobs. So you see this huge spike, and they immediately just were like, no problem. We got this.
Yeah.
We'll take care of it. And if you go to the site, there'll be links to directly donate to Three Square in the show notes and everything when this is out for everybody. Go there and, find out a little bit about what they do. I know that, not everybody's in Nevada, right? I get that, but this is taking place in a lot of different places around the country, right? And it's just nice that there's organizations like this out there. So whether you can support Three Square because you're in a position that you can, or this should strike you to now maybe look in your local community to see if there's an organization that's doing the same thing there, because, like what we're seeing in Texas right now and things like that, there's places like that struggle. But overall, Three Square was, if you see before COVID, they were accomplishing amazing things. Like they were taking to, I think, some of the rates of people having food, 3 meals a day were down to like astronomically low numbers, to where the people were guaranteed to have food. Like they're doing an incredible job, and their goal is to wipe out, making sure that if you are in that city, or if you're in that southern area of Nevada, you have a meal. You have a meal no matter what. It's there. Just come and ask us for it, right? So I watched the video not knowing much about them, and it immediately made me just be like, this is awesome. It's incredible what they're doing, right? And that's what this was for me. That's what I wanted to see too, was like, I wanted to find some of these really cool things that are happening out there, because, I'm into that, that's what I like. And so I think what they're doing is incredible. Obviously right now, it's a huge help because of what they're doing with, COVID and everything, and having to distribute meals in different ways, and more volunteers, like you talked about, the call center uptick in calls, right? So they had a transition, and they did a phenomenal job, it looks like, from, that aspect of making sure that through a crisis, people were still taken care of, no matter who you were, like you mentioned, right? They're not asking questions. It's, you need to eat, no problem. You're here, you need to eat, we've got you, you're taken care of, right? So awesome organization. Check them out, back them up if you can, send it to friends, get it out in front of other people. That's also what this is about, is just making sure that we spread this around, because maybe you don't have the money to donate, but you might get it out in front of somebody that can, spend some money or put some money towards that organization. Or like you said, your wife volunteers. Maybe it's some local Bills backers can give up a couple hours of their time, to help out and, do their part too. So there's plenty of ways to help. So awesome organization. Go ahead.
Add to that, Colt. I mean, it wasn't only them. I mean, it was the casinos as well. And, the casinos didn't have it, when they shut down, they had all this food that was either going to get thrown away or they had to donate it. And they were instrumental in getting their food into the hands of Three Square, which also was able to get it into the hands of the people that needed it. And, you brought up, well, maybe you don't live in Vegas. Well, here's something to think about when you come to Las Vegas, and everybody's got a little piece of Vegas in them. That's why the Golden Knights are so popular across the country. Everybody's got a little bit of Vegas in them because they've been here before, and they always have a great story and a great time, and a little bit of a memory. And if you want your experience to be the same as you remember it, it does help when you're putting food on the table for somebody until they can get back into their job. Because if you don't do that, then these people might move away, and there might be a shortage of people actually able to maintain the hotels, which would directly affect your experience. So I know we're reaching a little bit, maybe on those things, but guys, even though you don't live in this town, I mean, this is an experience for everybody, and everybody has come here and had a great time. Well, you have a good time because those people bust their tail to make sure that everything was just right for you to come and let loose. Well, now they need your help, and maybe you can give back to them a little bit.
Right, absolutely. I mean, you want to go have some fun, you need a place to have fun, right? So, and the other piece of that too is you kind of, gambling gets a bad rap, because I see that you go to Three Square, and one of their main, people that are sponsoring them and helping them out is the gaming commission, right? They're putting in here in California, or even, just the lottery, overall. I know it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, you don't want people wasting their money on it, like the possibility of this big sum of money being theirs. But a lot of that money goes to schools, and it goes to things that are helping out and doing big things, right? So having organizations like the Gaming Commission work directly with people that are directly impacted in their communities is huge, right? And so, like you mentioned, I like Vegas. I want to go back to the fun that Vegas is, and you don't realize it until it's gone, right? And everybody's now seen what it's like when it's gone, and it's nowhere near as much fun, right? Like everybody and their brother wants to go and get out of here. I mean, March Madness is coming up. I mean, there's spectacles that are supposed to be drawing you to that location, right? So this is just the opportunity to make sure that you help out and you can, right? Not only will you be putting money into the community by show up, make sure that everybody in that community can be taken care of too, right? I think that's all that this is really about. And, it sounds like, kind of on a soapbox a little bit, but it's a good cause. It's everywhere's, and like Dana said, we do all have a piece of Vegas in, one way or another. We're all going to end up going there now to watch our team play against the Raiders in this awesome new stadium, right? So you're going to be back there at some point. So make sure you can be there, right? So
yeah, no doubt about it. And the other thing too, Colt, in relation to all that we've gone through in the last year, I mean, Vegas is, slowly but surely, I mean, this city has had the lowest amount of new COVID cases last week than we had since the first week of September. And so that's that's really moving forward. And if you look at the numbers on a daily basis and you can see below 300 or below 400, that's a lot of progress, because I know it's not a lot by comparison to other states, but not too long ago, we had 3,000 new cases. So something is working, something is moving forward. We just got to keep on going that extra inch to make sure that these people are taken care of until they can get back into their jobs.
Absolutely. Makes sense. I mean, it's I say it usually at the end of everything, it's mask up. It's, it's kind of an annoying thing that we all had to do initially. Right. And I think as you've done it, it's kind of just like, okay, this isn't that bad. It's not that big of a deal. Let's just keep going. Let's keep going. The reality and our normal hope is on the horizon that we're going to get through this, and we're going to come out on the other side and get to go back and do the things that we all enjoy and want to do. Right. Just hang in there a little longer, be thankful we got sports. Be thankful that the world's still turning, right? Be thankful that you're still breathing, and, hopefully everybody in your family is, happy and healthy as well, right? So obviously, like I mentioned, the 3 Square, all their info will be in the show notes, links to everything, so you guys can help them out directly, links to follow them on social, their YouTube, see everything that they've got going on. It's a great organization, so you got everything available to them. So, unless you got anything else that you really want to talk about with 3 Square, you want to move into telling people how to help take down those big old monstrous Vegas books over there? Because
I would love to do that.
Right. Because that's what Dana is really good at, so I chatted with him a little bit, because one of my main questions was like, so this is what you do. So because I think a lot of the time the perception is it's always like you never want to go with the public, right? It's like, when do you bet? Do you bet when the line comes out? Do you wait till the line? Well, all the guys that are really good at it are going to move the line, so there's like all these things going on. So you beat all that, it sounds like, by getting up at like the crack of dawn and grinding for hours.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, and you really have to love what you're doing in order to make this being an effective industry for you. You have to not get too high when you win and not get too low when you lose. And that's the one that, I mean, just the psychological portion of wagering is something that you got to be able to make sure that you can, maintain a level head. I mean, before you even start looking at teams, you have to understand that, hey, look, when you're not doing well, not only can this affect you, but it also affects the way that you treat your family. And you got to be able to separate this and really look at it as if, hey, this is my business. And when my business is done, I go home, and now that's my portion of my life. And that really is the biggest thing. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Colt. I mean, I couldn't do what I do without my wife. And she is an amazing, backbone to everything I do. She allows me to, spend hours to make sure that, we can grind out a profit. And, I mean, hey, look, it took her a little bit for sure, because, everybody has their preconceived ideas about what I do. But, once, we've been together 10 years now. So now she knows that, hey, I got to do certain things in order for us to be successful. And so that's, just the psychological portion of it. And the discipline portion of it is, that's a huge mountain. And that's before we even get to bankroll and managing your bankroll, and then being able to, actually pick teams and know what you're looking for on a daily basis. Because this is a time of year, Cole. I mean, normally when college basketball is, insane. I mean, there's 100 games on a weekend, and then at some point you have the NHL, and you have the NBA, and you have NFL, and Major League Baseball is going to be starting up here in April, which runs into NBA and NHL as well. And you've got to be able to decipher and have a plan about what you're going to do, or you will be overwhelmed. And so that's really the everything in a nutshell. But being disciplined, your bankroll is huge, and I say that because you got to understand how to manage it. And where people get in trouble is, say they lose $100 on a game. Well, the next inkling is for them to bet 200 on the next one, or 400 on the next one. And that's where people really get in trouble. You got to be okay with the losses, and you got to be just okay with the wins, because, you're one losing streak around the corner. And, for me, after all this time I've done this, I really have come up with a mathematical approach, an analytical approach, which does two things for me. Number one, it keeps me in check as far as my bankroll is concerned. And secondly, it also takes emotion out of it. Now, I'm been doing this long enough where I can decipher, hey, look, I'm a Boston Bruins fan. I think this about this team because I know them a little bit more. I'm a little bit more invested. But the numbers kind of keep me leveled so where I don't, like last night when they played New Jersey. I mean, certainly you wouldn't think New Jersey would bounce up to bite the Bruins, but they did. I stayed away from it just because of a couple of factors that the analytics allowed me to stay away from or told me to stay away from it. So, but Colt, really the bottom line is, and any poker player will tell you this as well, they get to be a great poker player because they go through a lot of negative experiences, and it's really almost like a microcosm of life where you take your negative experiences and you say, okay, I can't do this again, and if I do, it's becoming a trend. In order to be successful, you have to quickly identify what you've done to make you unsuccessful and make sure that you don't do those things again. And again, it's like I tell my kids a lot, listen to your gut. Your gut will tell you what is right and what is wrong. It's difficult when you're looking at a losing night to sit back and say, God, I got 3 games left and I really want to play this last game so at least I could break even or maybe a little bit ahead and I can go to bed happy. And that's where really a lot of people get in trouble. If those games were not on your board to begin with, don't put them on your board just because you want to go to bed happy.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because I think, like you mentioned, a lot of people don't view it as like, I guess I would call it a legitimate profession, right? But excuse me, but like to me, it's the same as playing the stock market, right? Except it's a daily game, right? It's a daily thing where you have the ability to mathematically look at something and look at history in the present and put numbers in your head to come up with a decision, that you either put money towards it or you don't. But yeah, for me, like the longest, it's funny that you brought up that game last night because I actually had New Jersey, plus the 1.5, because they've been playing very tight with everybody, right? So that was a plus for me yesterday, which is a rarity, right? A very rare. NHL is like an Achilles heel for me almost. But like a lot of that, like you talked about, is lessons learned was I don't care anymore about, I'm not invested into the game any more than the numbers told me that was the right place to go, or I convinced myself that the numbers were telling me that's the way I needed to go, right? I don't bet the Bills really. I don't put that into play hardly ever, because I don't put any of that kind of stuff into it. To me, it's a mathematical thing, right? And I think if you want to be, because what's the rate that they say, like maybe 54% if you could be profitable?
Yeah, it's just under 53. Is it 52 and some change? Yeah,
52 and some change. So you've got to hit half the time, but to hit half the time against a professional, right? Because that's what the book is. It's a professional who's trying to beat you, right? Or at least get enough people to believe each side of it to make sure that it doesn't cost them anything except for the price of them putting the number up, right? But yeah, but for me, you kind of mentioned all those. So you still do every sport as everything's going. You still are playing through every sport. You don't kind of hammer down like as March is rolling in. Do you kind of just shift your focus to college basketball only, or do you still are just looking for what you believe is the best value for you?
I go in with my strengths for sure. I'll be honest with you. I started off with college basketball this year, and I'm able to step back and say, hey, look, I just can't get a handle on this. And of course, most of that has to do with COVID. Usually I'm exceptional in college basketball, but that just hasn't been the case this year. And I found myself being very good at the NBA just because it was a lot less volatile than college basketball. Some of these teams, how do you play off of a 2-week layoffs? I mean, how do you handicap that? How do you handicap what's going on in the locker room? And it's more volatile because you're dealing with children. You're not dealing with adults like you are in the NBA. So they handle things a lot differently and they process things differently. So it's very difficult to, put a proper analysis on a team because you don't know where their head is on night in and night out. And that's just for me. Some guys, some guys are all over it for sure. But for me, it was much easier for me to say, okay, I'm going to deal with the NBA. I'm going to deal with the NHL because these are, professionals and I know that, what they're going to be for the most part on a daily basis. But college basketball, I just said, you know what, we'll see you again next year. I'm going to make a lot of money in the NBA, which we've done. But you got to know when to walk away as well. Just you got to know when not to, when you don't have it. For instance, Duke has always been a team that you would look for, especially when they were getting a short number. And this is just was a team that wasn't in it mentally this year at all. So, their record indicated that. North Carolina is the same way. Record indicated head's just not in it. It doesn't mean they don't have the athletes. They're just not in it on a daily basis. And when your head coach, Mike Krzyzewski, comes out and says, hey, look, I don't think we should play this year, or I'm not for playing this year, that's really a message that you're sending your kids. So now what do you got after saying something like that? You got Mike Bray at Notre Dame saying things like, hey, I hope we'll see how many games we play this year, and I hope we do this, and I hope we do that. In the meantime, we're just going to have fun. Well, I've been following Notre Dame basketball long enough to know that Mike Bray is saying, hey, look, kids, we have no idea what's coming around the corner. We're just going to roll the ball out. We're going to play hard every single night, and we're going to hope that we, are on the winning end of most nights. So it's really difficult to handicap teams like that. Now, if I wanted to get back into it, I'm sure I could do much better right now, just because there are some teams that have played a number of games, and now you're kind of really trying to get a feel. You can get a feel for who they are. But for the first 2-3 weeks of the season, I had no idea who these teams were, honestly.
Yeah, well, they're doing like you mentioned, they're playing a lot. Some teams aren't playing at all, and then some teams are playing a lot, and then they're playing a lot of back-to-back against the same team now, which you wouldn't do typically, which makes it very difficult to be like, well, you would anticipate that a back-to-back, unless one team is really that much better than the other, it would be almost a split, or at least the number would fall to where they would cover one side of it either way, you would think. But to me, yeah, college basketball has been nuts, because a lot of the teams that you would even think are kind of like the ones that you typically would follow, that are kind of like the upset kind of teams that you feel like they get undervalued just because of where they play, what conference they're in or whatever, they typically are very good. And you can get into, like some of the Long Beach states of the past where you could follow a wave like that, but all those waves seem to be disrupted by the way that, like, to me, it almost makes me like, do you use a lot of historical numbers that you're used to, or do you just stay here and now with what you're seeing?
I have a really, what I think is a great saying, and I completely made it up, and I'm really proud of myself. Numbers only tell you where they've been. They'll never tell you where you're going. And I never really apply numbers to what I've seen. Like sometimes you'll hear guys say, well, in the last 10 games, this team has beaten this team 8 of the last 10 games. Well, okay, I can take a little bit from that. I can take maybe the intangible. But when your last 10 games goes back, like the beginning of the season, and 7 of those were last year, and the players have all changed, and maybe the dynamic have changed, the cultures have changed. It means absolutely nothing. So I really don't try to take too much from what I just saw and apply it to what I'm going to see. And the one thing that a lot of people don't take into account is, yeah, they're professional athletes, or they're all American athletes, but they're also professional coaches. Even at the college level, I really feel like these guys are professional coaches. So you can't you can't take what you just saw and apply it to the next game, because these coaches who are paid a lot of money to make sure that they make the proper adjustments are going to do so. That's why you see one team, one night, they're putting up 120 points in the NBA, and the next night they're putting up 105 against the same team. Well, it's called defensive adjustments. It's also called, guys are just feeling better one night to the next.
Right. Yeah. They just got their asses handed to them the night before, and they're like, we're not doing that again today. Right. Like, exactly. We get paid to play this game. Right. Yeah. So, and I think that with a lot of the teams not even playing their games this year in college and things like that, it loses its luster a little bit. Right. Like, when you're going to have this March Madness and you're going to have this national champion, well, was it truly the national champion? Because, like, not every team in the nation played. Right. Or played the same amount, or had the same, so I know, like, some of these folks that use like mathematical stuff where they're following, the algorithms and things of that nature. I wonder what a year like this does to all of that numbering, all the data they've been putting in, because it's been so sporadic this year with the way that all those trends that you would typically see, that this team's great on the road against this and this. It's like, well, how do you know any longer? Because what did they do last time? They had 14 days off, and then they played one game, and then they played them on the second day. And, like, they're playing a lot of weird scheduling too. So it just makes me wonder if for those types of people that really follow that, if there's going to be this big change in what they do. But it sounds like you've just kind of have your experience and what you really kind of just are looking for on your daily is more your vibe.
Well, I wrote an article for a website recently, and they asked me, well, what's the difference between the stock market, the lottery, and playing and sports betting? And as I was writing, I was kind of thinking, well, the lottery is kind of a lot of what people do. I know, guys, it's these analytics that people are using to apply to sporting events. It really is no different than somebody taking an average of numbers in the lottery and saying, well, this is what's going to happen because this is the average of what has happened. It really doesn't make any difference, and it's not a great way to handicap things, especially when we're talking about totals. You can have a 2-1 game in the NHL, but the pace of play was up and down the ice. I mean, they were in each other's offensive zones. There wasn't a lot of neutral zone tie-ups. You can see the access into each other's offensive zones. It resulted in 60 shots on net, but it was a 2-1 game because both goaltenders were hot. Well, a lot of people will say, geez, 2-1, total today is 6. Well, that seems ridiculous. I'm going to go under. Well, yeah, but you didn't watch why or how it got to that point where, pace of play has almost more to do with, or has much more to do with the outcome of what's going to be rather than what a previous score was between the two teams.
Yeah, the NHL to me is very difficult, especially now, even the way that they're playing, right? Their divisions have changed up this season a little bit. So they're playing against teams that they wouldn't typically play as much, right? So to me, it's been very tough to see because that's the over under in the NHL is such a challenging thing. And then it makes me feel like the 1.5 is like, why would you never just not take 1.5, right? Like if you go and look at scores of hockey games, they typically are within like 2 goals of each other a lot of the times. So it's like, why you could probably bet most of the time the 1.5 and be very successful. But if you go and actually watch it take place, no, then you get a 4-1 game. You get 5-1, you get 5-2, you get the NHL is a weird sport. Like, I feel like you have to like really be deep in the NHL to be really good at it.
Well, the one thing about the NHL is if you continuously take those 1.5s, you're not going to have success because in order to get 1.5, you're laying sometimes 220
big money.
or 230.
Yeah, big money.
If you lose $230 just to win 100, you're going to have to win 3 more games just to overcome that. That's 75%. And to me, when we're dealing with money lines, I want to be somewhere around that 55-60% range. In order to be successful, I don't want to be in a position where I have to win 3 more games just to overcome a $2.20 loss.
See, that's the kind of stuff that like is all your bankroll related stuff, right? That's all part of that for you, right? So it's important to. So you're then because I've heard both sides of it, where some people say just pick a set amount and you just go with that set amount and that's your bet for every bet that you do, or do you go more of like what I'm seeing by number wise dictates what I'm going to do as far as my bet?
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth on that. I mean, what I do is I divide my total bankroll up into I divide it into a fraction, and then that's the money that I use to kind of try to build. Now, if I lose that fraction of my bankroll, I still have a lot of bankroll left. But the idea is to grow your seed into a flower, basically. And if that doesn't work, that's okay because I got a great garden besides this one flower. That's kind of my philosophy behind it. Sometimes I'll do a percentage if I feel a little bit better about a team. Sometimes I will only. It depends on where I want my bankroll to be. Keep in mind too, when you're trying to maintain a household and you're trying to maintain your living, you also have to make sure that you make a certain amount on a daily basis. So you kind of weigh those, but no matter what the outcome is and what you determine after looking at both of those factors, you never want to get too ahead of yourself or too greedy because a bad day because you were greedy could set you back 3 more. Now I never mind losing, but I don't want to lose because I went outside my box and my area that I'm used to being fenced in. And that fence is there to protect me from me. And when I go outside of that, yeah, I could win bigger, and I put myself ahead. But is it really worth it in the long run to lose 1 game and then have to win 3 more just to make up for that loss? Stay within yourself. That's the key.
So you have like a daily goal, a weekly goal. Will you bet every day that there's a game? Do you look for something every single day, or do you
Oh yeah.
go days where you won't play?
No. I mean, there are days that I won't. I mean, I work for two websites that require me to put up games on a daily basis, which I have no problem doing. So I always have an opinion on something every day. Now, it's kind of funny. I mean, we just got through with the Super Bowl, and I always tell my clients all the time, it's like, yeah, I know you want to bet the Super Bowl. I get it. But they don't pay you anymore just because you won the Super Bowl. I really
Right.
like this NBA game, or I really like this NHL game going on at the same day. Is it about winning or is it about playing? And if it's about playing, then you have no business being involved in it, even any more than a passing interest here and there. But if you want to be serious about it, the Super Bowl doesn't get my blood boiling any more than a weekday Rangers Devils game when I really feel like I have an advantage.
Right. That's funny because I would have thought this year too, and I didn't get involved in the Super Bowl, but to me, it felt like there was only one side to take in this Super Bowl, no
Yeah,
matter what. Right. And I
yeah,
mean, why you would go the other way against Brady is, I mean, it just didn't feel right, especially at like a 3.5 number. I was like, I just don't feel like this is going to be a shellacking by any one of these teams, is the way I was going into it, so I felt like Brady was going to keep it close either way, but I still couldn't convince myself to just do it, even though I for like 2 weeks was like, there's no way he's not going to be in this, or he's probably going to win this. Right. So that kind of transitions me. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, do you ever mess around with playing any of the season totals and things of that nature? Do you get involved in the MVP odds, like when they put them out early? Cause Vegas, which I kind of wanted to touch on, is like how good they are at this, right? Or
yeah.
I guess it's probably not just like one individual, right? It's a group of people that are coming up with this number, or maybe it starts with one individual's belief and a group of people back that up, and that's how we get the number,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
I mean, to me, it feels like a little bit like, is that how they do it for sure? Like, 'cause I don't know
Well, there's
100%.
a misconception, and this is not to be derogatory to anybody who makes the numbers, but honestly, their only goal is really just to get equal action and have an idea of which what team or what number is going to create equal action. Honestly, if you look at a typical college basketball, Saturday, if you go through the games and you point out the ones that are within 3 to 5 points of the point spread, it's really not that much. I mean, they're on with some, they're not on with others. I mean, typically when Duke is playing North Carolina, I want to put a 5 up on Duke. I mean, that doesn't take a lot of knowledge to know that that's probably a good number that's going to get equal action on both sides. But the stories come when somebody gets beat by a half or somebody gets beat by one, and that's where people think, oh wow, they know something and this and that. Well, yeah, they do know something. They're professionals just like anybody else at their job, but they don't talk about the game that was the favorite was an 8-point favor and ended up being a 30-point game. They were uh, nowhere near that number. But again, it's not about being near the number. It's about creating equal action, which they do very well. So basically, the way it works, and I have friends that have been odds makers before, and they tell me, hey, look, you might have guys that are specializing in one sport, and they'll throw out a number, and then there will be the heads odds maker that will say, okay, this is a send out number, and then they'll send out that number to the books, and then the books will adjust it from where they think their client base is. And again, the odds makers are trying to get equal action on both sides, but then the bookmakers are also trying to get equal action on each side as well. So, for instance, if a number on the Las Vegas Raiders goes out, Raiders 3.5, we'll say 3.5. Well, you may that's probably bad, but we'll say 2. 2 is a better number because you want to get it off those key numbers. But the the books may say, well, hey, I think we're going to get a lot of Raider money. So in order to get some Charger money or whatever, maybe we'll move it to 3 and we'll put it right on that key number, and it probably will not move off that key number, so we can get equal action because we're in Vegas, and I know a lot of people are going to come in and they're going to bet Las Vegas because it's only a 2-point spread. 3 makes you it's a little bit different because now you're dealing with a field goal, and that's where they will adjust. But if you're in another state, well, you don't have a lot of Raider bettors coming in, so you might keep it at that 2 or maybe bump it up to 2.5. So it just really depends on clientele.
Gotcha. So would you bet something like some of these MVP odds that just came out?
Yeah, honestly, no. And
Yeah.
the reason why is, again, it's just they're fun. It's like when the Super Bowl props come out, I'm not really in it. I get asked all the time about which ones that I like. I'm not really invested in it because, again, that's not my business model. My business model is to stay within my fence, to bet, the way that I feel like is going to be most beneficial to me financially. And really, these prop bets are just, they're fun bets, and that's really the only way that they should be treated. But to sit there, especially with baseball, and say, well, who do you think is going to be the MVP, or who do you think is going to win a specific division? Yeah, it's pretty easy to go, yeah, I think the Dodgers, the Padres are going to win the West. Yeah, you're probably going to be right about that. But, a couple injuries here and there. And we know in the past the Dodgers have had injuries to their pitching staff. And, what happens if a Tatis goes down? What happens if, key guys go down in the middle of a lineup? Now, all of a sudden, your big hitter doesn't have any protection. Well, that could hurt you for, 2 weeks, or it could hurt you for 2 months, depending on the injury. So for me, when I'm trying to manage my money, I don't want my money tied up that long. So I kind of shy away from those things. But they're great if you come to Vegas and you want to bring something home with you to root for the whole season. And there's all kinds of options for you. But when you live in Vegas, I don't need to partake and I don't need to jump in that pool because I'm here every day and I don't need something to give me action all year long because where I'm from doesn't have sports betting. I have it every single day.
Right. It's in your backyard. Right. That's funny. I like to look at it a little bit because Vegas is usually kind of understands what's going on with the game, or at least they get a lot more insider knowledge than I'm sure I'm getting or whatever. So the things that I look at in the futures is who they're predicting as division winners, more or less. But even this year in the NFL, it feels pretty straightforward on who you would be able to say is going to be the next kind of like division winner in each division. So let's transition a little bit since this is the Buffalo nerd. You can obviously tell by my background and things that I am a Bills fan. So let me ask you, Dana, who's your team, NFL? Who's your favorite team?
Well, I mean, I have to be a Raider fan because that they're in my backyard. But honestly, I'm sure you're going to kick me off the podcast when I tell you that I grew up a Cowboy fan, and I will probably die a Cowboy fan. But right. I do have a little room for the Raiders because it's difficult for me to not root for my my home team. Now I have really good friends here that are huge Bills fans that they do not move off of the Bills no matter what. They don't move off the Bills, they don't move off of the Sabres. But I've been in this town 28 years. I don't want to sit here and root against my home team. So that's kind of where I am. Now if the Eagles moved into town, that'd be a little bit different. But it'd probably be different for you because you have another AFC team coming in. But the Raiders never really had a rivalry with them, so it's pretty easy to kind of at least wrap one arm around them.
Yeah, right. I mean, growing up in Western New York, you shouldn't have any other choice than to come out a Bills fan, right? I mean, but yeah, I mean, now that you've been in Vegas long enough, I feel like that's one of those locations that you could be like, yeah, I'm a Raiders fan. And we're growing up, near Albany, the only choices back then too would have been to be a Giants fan, and nobody wants to do that, right? So I mean, I'm not a fan of the Cowboys, but I will not kick you off of the show because of that. But that's more just because as we transition into Bills, I'd like people to understand where your opinion's coming from, right? You're a Dallas Cowboys fan, and how much do you actually watch the Bills?
I mean, quite a bit. I mean, I don't watch them from start to finish. I mean, I try to get through, 15 games a week or whatever it is with the buys, but, I try to get it through them as quickly and form an opinion as much as possible. But one of the things I really like to do with, in any sport is not listen to the national guys, but I listen to the beat writers, and I read a lot of beat writers, back in Buffalo. I know Mike Harrington is been a tremendous writer for the Buffalo Sabres for years. And, a lot of his stuff I read. And those are the guys that are in the locker rooms. I've been in these locker rooms. I know exactly, those are the guys that really know. And the national guys come in on the weekend and, they need to do one broadcast and then they leave. So it's really about the local guys for me. That's the most important.
All right, so it's good to say. I figured you probably did watch more than the average person, even though it's not you're not a fan of the team per se, right? Because you're just doing research to find out what the opportunities are going to be coming into the next weeks and everything like that. So with you actually having a strong, look at what the team does, what do you think the Bills are right now? Are they the AFC East champ in your opinion for the next, say, 5 years with what challenge from the Dolphins maybe?
Yeah, well, 5 years is going to be tough, but I can tell you they certainly are on top right now. I mean, they have to figure out what they're going to do with Matt Milano. I mean, obviously, when you take your best linebacker out of the lineup, and potentially he's going to leave Buffalo. I mean, that's going to leave a big hole. They were 12-1 with Milano, and I know he didn't play a full schedule, but certainly when he is in the lineup, I mean, you can tell that they play with a lot more confidence. I just don't think they're going to be in a position to match any offer that he's going to get. And of course, you probably know that they're right up against the salary cap. And I think any moves that they do make on this team is not going to be, to pay Milano. I think it's going to be to maybe shore up that offensive line. So if they do that, I mean, that's got to be the focus, because they've got to go back to the running game a little bit. I realize that that's not really the forte of your offensive coordinator there. I mean, him and Nick Saban got into it years ago about not running the ball, but you do have some good backs there, and I think I'd like to see your offense become a little bit more balanced. But on a defensive side, if they're comfortable with AJ Klein, which it looks like that they are, Milano will probably be on his way out. But I think that offensive line, I mean, if they can get stronger across the line, I mean, boy, that's going to be a real difficult team to beat in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. The defensive line to me needs a bit help. They need to figure out what's going on over there. There's way too much money being spent over there for the production that we're getting. And I get this defense isn't built to be like a big number defense, right? That's not necessarily the way that Leslie Frazier likes to roll. But I feel like for that kind of money, we needed a little more impact, especially with some of these decisions, like you just mentioned, that we're going to have to make. Milano is going to be on his way out, or you can try to let go of somebody that you brought in last year, maybe to keep them around. But yeah, to me, the offense, you got to run. I mean, yes, when Josh Allen's hot, you don't really want to take the ball out of his hands, but he can run too, right? If you just want to do it designed. But I felt like this last year, we didn't get the backs involved enough. Even though I'm not 100% sold on Singletary, I don't feel like we necessarily got the backs involved enough to let them get a rhythm to get going. And the offensive line progressed, but we definitely need to shore up the offensive line and make sure that it's a set piece for the future to roll with for at least a few years. Because continuity on the line, to me, on the offensive side of the ball, is one of your hugest successes in being able to have a really good football team. I mean, that changes everything with what those guys do up front. What do you think about? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say about Singletary. I mean, you got to find out. I mean, 2 years ago, I don't think anybody thought any different that he would carry the load. Now, I think, people are questioning whether or not he can. In fact, I think Zach Moss in a good number of games even had more touches than Singletary had. So you really have to figure that out. And then as far as your offensive line is concerned, I mean, if your measuring stick is Kansas City, you were unable to handle the Kansas City blitz, which, essentially was what, brought Buffalo down against Kansas City. So those are the two areas. But on the flip side of that, it's like cry me a river, because outside of Kansas City, to me, this is the most feared offense in the NFL. And I'll even throw Green Bay in there. As far as throwing the ball, I think Josh Allen is just going to get better. And if you can get a running game behind him to become even more balanced, I think even though his numbers may go down, the team overall will become more effective. And essentially that would even help your defense, because your defense won't be on the field nearly as much either.
Right. Yeah. The defense, it took a big hit this year, I think, statistically too, because the offense did so well. Right. I mean, something's got to give when you're up by a lot of points. There's going to be categories that are going to drag you down. And part of that is just giving up trash yards at the end of a game when you're up 30. Right. So it's going to naturally make your defense struggle a little bit. But like you just mentioned, we couldn't stop the blitz against Kansas City. And I also felt like we didn't get there as well. So the lines on both sides need addressing, but like you mentioned, Milano, I do feel like he's going to be out. I was really hoping he might want to kind of like stick around on like a 1 year. Let's give it 1 year. You came off the injury, you looked really good, but let's do a 1 year deal let the cap go back up next year, and then we can give you the money that we should be able to give you. But I think he's just going to take it right now. I mean, we watched it happen last year. Jordan Phillips left, everybody that we said last year where they've earned the opportunity to go out and test free agency didn't come back. Right. So, I mean, and they've said that about Milano already. So I do feel though that this coaching staff is set up for stuff like this, the best that the Bills have been in a very, very long time, right? Like they're okay with, okay, we'll make the move. The other spot that I think we need to worry about a little bit is our cornerback depth. At the CB2, I'd like to see somebody a little better there. And I was saying for the longest time in agreement with you that Zach Moss, I thought was going to be the number one back before the end of the season, when the season started, because I feel like he's built more for what this team needs to be able to do when the snow starts flying. He's played 4 years at Utah. He's used to playing in some cold. I felt like he was going to be the guy, and I still think he will be, but there needs to be another back. Somebody needs to be coming in. I've been kind of clamoring, even Ingram might be just a nice little veteran piece to kind of bring in that can help develop and, hopefully get these guys rolling. But I'm not sold on Singletary either at this point. He looked really good, but a lot of the times he just looks like a flash in the pan to me. And we need more than that, unless he's going to be the third down guy, and that's it.
Well, the other thing too, you have to factor in is the NFL cap minimum is going to go down because of, basically because of COVID, and, you're not going to be able to spend $200 million, or I think it was 198 last year. It's going to be down to right around 188, 189 million dollars. And, so that money that you would normally use to, keep some of your, your veterans, they're just not going to be able to do this year. And, they're going to make a decision. It's like, okay, well, did we shore up our top linebacker spot, or did we take that money and put it across the offensive line, which essentially would cost us a lot less money?
Well, and especially when you got Josh Allen dollars coming up in your future,
That's exactly right.
And you got Traymon Edmonds dollars coming up in your future. If you're going to let Milano walk out the door, you're telling me that you're 100% on Edmonds, right? Like you have no question that he's going to get paid next year then, right? Yeah. And you have to pay him and Josh in the same year potentially, which is going to be a very difficult challenge. So hopefully that number goes back up, right? Because if COVID goes away, the NFL will generate more money, which should bring the numbers and everything back up, right? Yeah. I'm sure as soon as the doors open full go, every stadium is going to be filled, once we get out of this, right? And, especially even some of the stadiums that are going to probably still have terrible teams like Jacksonville and places like that, they're going to have a shiny new piece at quarterback potentially that people are still going to want to see. There's still going to be some fun stuff going on. But I know we're coming up on it, almost an hour here. We're getting pretty close. So I want to say thank you, Dana, for coming on. Yeah, and you've been up for hours already, so I'll let you get on with your life. I appreciate you coming on today and chatting with me, giving us a little insight into things, bringing Three Square to my attention, and to now hopefully out to a bunch of other people's attention, as we can kind of spread this around out there, hopefully. Yes. Like I mentioned a bunch already, you guys will be able to find everything in the show notes and all that kind of stuff of how to get to everybody throughout the whole time here. You can find Dana on Twitter there at Dana Lane Sports. You've seen it on the ticker if you've been watching. Also, if you want to get on board with what Dana's doing, you can find him over at pickdogs.com. Follow along with his action and what he's up to. You follow him on, if you follow him on Twitter, you'll get connected to all the other stuff that he's doing, where he's writing, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like I said, so Dana, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it. Hopefully we'll catch up again in the future sometime. Hopefully continued success. Hopefully for some success for me in the future. And of course, I got to end it with a Go Bills. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Buffalo Nerd with Colt Schroeder. Before you go, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Colt on all social channels at The Buffalo Nerd and at thebuffalonerd.com.